Casey, Ella, you want to go outside?
Okay, so you have an application. Presumably, you've built everything and you got it working the way you want. Um, Trying to get this to open. So I'm going to open up the my. This is just the database review project. It doesn't really matter what it is. I just want to show you where your project ends up. Sometimes we don't get to this so much, but in the case of this um, program, if I go look at my bin folder, I've got a release which doesn't have anything. All my build has been done in the in the debug folder. Yep. And so if I go into actually at the solution level, if I go into bin debug, I can see that's where my exe is. So theoretically, I should be able to just copy that just as an example. And I'm just going to go to my desktop to simulate. I need to clear out my desktop. So there's that debug folder. I made a copy of it, and if I run the exe, if everything compiled before the last time, okay, it should open up and start running. So I'll give it a few seconds. And yeah, I've got a working program, and it's connecting up to this database. And this database is actually the config file is the config file we were playing around with. If I wanted to put that database on a network server, I could take take these two files out of this application, move it to a server location, and then change this relative reference to an absolute reference, and then all the applications will be pointing to the same database. So if you're making perhaps an application that was going to be used by some company, and they were going to all access it in the same access the same database. That would be one very rudimentary, simplistic way of deploying it. Does that make sense? So that's the primitive way of doing it. Now I've grabbed it from the debug folder. Really, what you'd want to do is you want to go to build. And I'm going to look at the properties for this for the project. And if we look at it, if I look at my build, I want to build it for release, not for Actually, I think I have it up here. Nope, I think it's in here. Oh, I had stuff running. Hold on a second. Here we go. Up here you see configuration. You can say debug, release, or all configurations. I'm going to change it to release. And then I'm going to do my build. And if I go back to look at my folder, now if I go to my bin and I look in release, okay, doesn't look like it built yet. Hold on.
Hey Rob, you
Yeah.
see the debug on the top left? There should be a drop down on the very, very top left.
Oh,
You could click that
shoot.
debug and
There it is.
do release. One below that. Yeah, just below yep, that one.
Yeah.
That will hold the release.
Release, yeah. So I think it's got it now. There we go. So this is the release version. And the release version, basically, there's a symbol table that's made when you run in debug mode. And that symbol table takes space. Let's see if there's a difference in the sizes here. If I look at the release and look at properties, it should be a different size. 16 megabytes. If I look at the debug properties, same thing. Maybe it's not a big deal with this particular program. But in any case, you can have two configurations, debug and release. Usually you build for release, and then this is actually all you need to run that program. That's what you could distribute in a zip file if you had to. Does that make sense? So that's one way of distributing a program. That's probably the most primitive way of doing it. And here they talk about Xcopy deployment. Xcopy is basically just it's a program that it's basically a copy command, and you would copy from there to wherever you needed to deploy your application. And here they say suitable under the following circumstances. The application is self-contained. It doesn't need to be updated to update the client to run. Must move from one location to another, such from a build location to a publish location. The application does not require shell integration. So if it's fairly straightforward, you could use that. Another way you can do it is you have two other primary methods, which is Windows Installer and Click Once Installer. And they have instructions on these. Both of these will actually make a more of like when you downloaded, Word or Excel or some of these other programs and you have an installer, these programs make those kinds of installers where everything's kind of in a self-contained package. They double click on it and it doesn't install. And you have options to, pick what icons you want and whether it's going to be placed in the start menu and all sorts of things like that. So that's a little bit more sophisticated deployment. Probably the way it makes more, it's more professional to deploy your application. And so Windows Installer, it allows applications to be packaged as a self-contained executable that can be easily distributed to clients and run. The installer is installed with Windows and enables integration with the desktop, the start menu, and the program's control panel. Windows Installer simplifies installation and uninstallation, so you get an uninstaller with these. So, someone decides to uninstall a program, they can go to add remove programs, and they will be able to uninstall the program this way. So probably a better way of deploying it if you're going to send out your application. And then click once deployment, fairly similar. It adds the support to be able to do updates. So you can set up a web site or a file server that where click once can go look to, and then if every time it starts, your application runs, it looks to see if there's an update. If there's an update, it'll give the user the opportunity to update the version of software they have, and then they would download that new version, install it, and then start running. So you've probably worked with software like that, and you probably that is also, if you're going to be doing a much more enterprise type of application, or one where you're going to maintain a connection with your customers, then you would use click once, and they have a link here. So does that make sense with the different types of deployments? So this is let's see, that looked like. And there's quite a bit to this because there's a lot of options on your deployments. If we look at this one, create an installer package. This creates, you've seen an MSIs before. And, I'm not going to go through all of this. But you go through these instructions, and you walk through these steps, and it'll set up the deployment. There's also things with databases. So, your database may be integrated in your application like we built, or the database may be a separate database that your application links to. And if you go through these steps, it'll walk through those deployments. This is click once. And you can read through employing click once. Let's see, that's for C++. So anyway, after this course is over, probably not a bad idea to try to play around with those application deployments. I spend most of my time doing web stuff, so I don't do deployments of Windows applications that much. But the documentation is there, and probably worthwhile. One day, what I want to do is I want to have a Windows application, a web application, and a phone application that all link up to my own data API, and then a augmented reality application that all kind of work together and connect up with the same data. So there I'll probably have to put all those things together, and probably I would put the deployment of the Windows application on that on the website so you could download it and install it. I was also toying with the idea of setting up maybe my own customized installer where you go to a web page and it gives you the opportunity to, the web page just basically downloads the Windows application. When you download it, it opens up, and then everything else it gets done completely from the Windows application to data APIs, and you don't have to use a client or a browser to work with things. Just to see what the ramifications of that would be. But any questions on deployment? Yeah, Stephen, I think you're right. And the key there is that when they build for debug, they've got to make it so that they can trace what's happening in the execution with where you are in the code. If you were to optimize, the relationship between the code that's running may not have much to do with what's in your original source code. Some of that could get erased, and so you might not have a direct link, because sometimes those optimizations actually include just getting rid of whole sections of code and replacing them. If you have a section of code that really always returns the same result, most likely the optimization will get rid of that code and just hard code that result. If you wrote things with a variable and it makes more sense to do that with a literal, it might swap those things out. So yeah, the debug won't have all the optimizations. Any questions? Okay, so the rest of this is lab time. Let's try to complete our programs, and we'll do the same thing. Let's see. Yeah, so today's lab day, next time is lab day, and then the last one is a quiz. It'll be the polymorphism quiz. Basically, you'll be given a short program to make that will employ polymorphism. So for that quiz, what I recommend is look back over, abstract classes, inheritance, and polymorphism, because most likely what you'll be doing is building some kind of a parent class and then having to build some derived classes, build some kind of a structure to, some kind of a data structure, probably a list or an array that will contain multiple elements, and those elements will be, one kind of list that will hold the different that will hold any of the child classes. Yes, I do drop the lowest quiz grade. So if you've got all A's up to this point, this will not be a super stressful quiz. Make sense? All right, rest is lab time. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm getting that the database review stuff. It's uploading to YouTube as we speak, so I still have a little bit more to do to get that processed so I can publish it. Yeah, I intend to put the code up as well. Okay, the recording just went out. Let me know if you find it. Did the zip file come through as well? Cool.